Welcome in to Mile High Insiders. We have no Luke tonight, but we do have Ron White, my co-host from the Orange and Blue View on Saturdays, filling in. How you doing, Ron?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here on this Wednesday talking Denver Broncos football with everyone.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's hard not to be excited about these Broncos for
Oh yeah.
sure. Even though I'm sick with COVID, I still have some excitement, hopefully, in my voice for this 5-game winning streak that I really, if you had asked me, 4 or 5 weeks ago, I wouldn't think was possible. But here we are, and it's so much fun to watch this team turn it around. Mostly from I think all three phases have really kicked in at some point, but the defense has definitely done its part. And now we see that they're starting to get healthier. While teams
Hmm.
are losing players, starters, the Texans just lost their starting offensive guard. The Broncos are getting a playmaker on offense back. And I say playmaker because he really was in camp. When I watched him in camp, did good in preseason, and was injured early. Still has 3 touchdowns on the season. Brandon Johnson is now activated from the injured reserve. So Broncos are staying healthy and getting back to full strength for the most part, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, it really is. Brandon Johnson had missed those last 4 games with that hamstring injury. And he said he feels good. The leg feels good. And he's ready to go. So I know in the presser today from Sean Payton, Payton's obviously glad to have him back. He mentioned, the explosion, the physicality for Brandon Johnson. He likes the size and he can block. And as you mentioned, Thomas, in training camp, there were many that were raving about him in training camp, and he's second in scoring touchdowns on this team behind Cortland Sutton. So, having that playmaker back on offense is definitely encouraging. And I hope, the Broncos can, once he kind of gets back into shape and back into the offensive plan, they can use him and open up this offense a little more.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think he might bring a little more juice than we've seen from Jerry Judy at this point. Jerry Judy really has been pretty lackluster for the most part. And Brandon Johnson's he's got some skills, even though he
Mhm.
doesn't have the draft pedigree or anything like that. He seems like he really has the want to go out there and make some noise. So let's see if he's back in football shape and see if he's ready to play. I imagine that they'll put him on the active roster. They have, I think, 1 days to actually
Mhm.
put him on the roster once they've announced it. But if he's feeling good and he's back in football shape, he might get. I doubt he'll get a ton of playing time first week, but he'll probably build it up, and next weekend he'll probably get a little bit more playing time. But it's great news. When was the last time this Broncos team has been this healthy? I mean,
Man,
really, at this point in the year, I just can't remember it. It was
remember.
when they actually probably won the
Super
Super.
Bowl 50? Around that time probably was the last time. And like you said, it's so exciting to have, players already back or coming back. That's just a testament to the strength and conditioning, staff and kind of how these players are remaining for the most part, healthy. Of course, they're obviously going to be nicks and knacks as the season goes on, but they're coming back, and then we're going to get, they're going to get Greg Dulcich back here soon as well. So that'll be another playmaker. So it's just so nice to see.
Well,
It's very nice to see.
if you think about it, man, that they only have 5 players on injured reserve who will not be able to come back. Only 5, because
Mhm.
Alex Palczewski went on early. He can be activated anytime because he's healed up from that injury because wasn't that bad. And then you said Dulcich. That's it. Otherwise, there's 5 players, and only a couple of them were starters. So very healthy. It's great to see Brandon Johnson back. I really can't wait to see what he can do, in the offense as it starts to improve and starts to play a little bit easier defenses from my perspective. I
Mhm.
think their offense is going to start clicking a little bit more. So I think it's wonderful. But let's say hi to David McIlrath coming in with a super chat. David, thank you so much for your generosity and thank you for your positivity with the Broncos. You've had it the whole year. And David says, good evening, Broncos country. Luke, Tom, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. Well, it's not Luke tonight. He's off. It's Ron in with me tonight, the Orange and Blue View host, co-host with me. He says 11-6, Buckham times 3, Mile Huddle for life. Denver Broncos for life. Prediction. He's going with a prediction already. Broncos 34, Texans 20. What do you think about that prediction, Ron?
Before I get to that thank you, David, for coming in. You know, we always appreciate you. And yeah, you've been sticking with your gun, your record prediction, 11-6, and I'm here for it. I like it. That, I would say at the beginning of the season that didn't sound too promising, but that's definitely realistic now. And that record prediction, not the record prediction, but the score prediction for the game on Sunday, I don't know. I would say the Texans have been scoring. I've been looking at their average, and it's been around the 21 to 25-6 mark. So I would say that is probable, at least the score on their end. For the Broncos, I'm not sure if they're going to get into the 30s. Never say never. Again, this offense is improving. We're seeing, the design and the scheme, the plan for Peyton, running the football. But I think, the Broncos are going to have to get into more of the passing. It may even be more of a shootout, just because what we've seen from CJ Stroud, Tank Dell, and that offense of the Texans. It's, I know there are a lot of rookies. This is their first year and everything, but they've been playing some very good football. So it may be a little bit of a higher score for the Texans. But if this turnover streak continues, that can definitely happen. But we can't bank on this turnover streak and having turnovers every game. But we'll see.
Well, I'll tell you this. Back when I said that if the Broncos could beat the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, that they would pretty much run the table, and yet I picked them to not beat the Browns, and that was a mistake because I thought the Browns could run the ball on them. I guess I'm just going to have to stick with my guns and predict them to win the rest of the year. Just run the table, and we'll see what happens. But if they need to make the playoffs, they're going to have to come pretty close to running the table. But against the Texans, the Texans were playing a lot better, to start the season. Then I think lately, the last two games, they have coughed the ball up, a few times. So, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one. Hopefully, the Broncos continue with their pace at turnovers, and you can read about an article that I put out there on milehuddle.com talking about the last 3 seasons of playoff teams and what that turnover looked like and how that pace could continue. It's probably not going to be the same, but it's probably going to continue somewhat. So check it out. Michael Ronquillo, thank you. Coming in from Facebook, always with the support for these shows. We appreciate it. Saying good evening, Thomas and Ron on Mile High Insiders. Go Broncos. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Sorry that I am under the weather and not my usual exciting self, but hopefully I'll feel better soon. And we got Bronco Bradley and the Peytonettes. That's quite a name coming in with a super chat. Thank you so much, Bronco Bradley. We really do appreciate the support. So thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about maybe the defense and what's been kind of that catalyst. Obviously, the turnovers is a big deal. Everybody's watching the turnovers. What are some of the other things that you can talk about, Ron, that has helped this defense really turn around?
Yeah, I would say that 70-point game against Miami. They still talk about it to this day, so it's looming large still within that locker room. And just the belief, Thomas. The belief in the players to go out and execute. The belief in Vance Joseph as well. They have that belief that they can, they preach execution. They preach, being sound on defense. And I think that belief with Vance Joseph is helping to turn this team around and getting these playmakers involved. There was a lot of concern After with no more Randy Gregory, no more Frank Clark, we know what's going to happen up front, and we've seen, with the return of Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper, they're getting consistent pressure there up front, and the secondary has always been good, but they're playing as well. So I would say my concern though with the defense, although they've done some very great things over this 5-game winning stretch, the run defense is still a concern for me.
Yep.
I've seen it the past few games where, they're just, the opponents just churning out 8 and 9 yard runs. And I'm like, this is still too leaky for my liking.
Yep.
So I think if they shore that up on defense and, continue to execute, get pressure up front and, sustain this turnover streak, I think that'll set the Broncos up in position, if they do make the playoffs and beyond.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with health, though, too. I mean, obviously the turnovers are the biggest factor, and we can talk about whether that can continue or what, but the health of this team has been significant. The only real missing player that starter for on the defense that is Caden Stearns, and PJ Locke has filled in incredibly well.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's the reason why they signed that safety to the practice squad, because I think PJ Locke is going to spend less time on special teams, because even when Kareem Jackson does return, I think PJ Locke is going to continue to be the starter. Maybe not on the depth chart, but he will be technically the starter. So, and then you see these other teams where their health is not as good. I mean, they played Cleveland without their starting quarterback. There's been these missing pieces for these other teams, and that's helped the defense. But I will say this, even though that there are concerns about the defense, I think the offense is going to start to look like they're carrying more of the load rather than the defense, because like I said earlier in this show, you're starting to run into the end of the schedule where the defenses here that they're playing are not as stout as the ones they have. And on top of it, they went out and they did a pretty solid job against the Cleveland Browns defense,
Yes.
that team's defense has been extremely solid. And I think that if they can do that against the Cleveland Browns defense, they should be able to put up better numbers and be able to score, maybe easier. I think a lot of the mistakes that they would have scored more against the Browns had they not committed some of their own mental mistakes in some of those drives. So I think you'll start to see the offense carry more of a load, and then, the defense won't have to, and maybe when that turnovers aren't there, the offense can kind of take center stage.
Yep. And then I'm going to get back to that, but I want to get Phil here. Thank you for McLaughlin for coming. We appreciate it. He says, good evening, Thomas, Ron, and Deacon Scott. Is it Saturday again? I'm hoping to see a more open game this week. Russ going deep. Hashtag Buckham. Hashtag Go Broncos. Hashtag MHH for life. Yeah, Phil, you bring up a good point. It's, this offense is going to have to open up. So I have some numbers here. And, speaking of, the 16 takeaways that the Broncos have received on defense, you know how much they're cashing that in, Thomas? So they've only gotten 35 points total off of those takeaways. So that's an average of 2.1 points per takeaway. Not even a field goal. So, this offense, to your point here, Phil, this offense has to open up. And not only now and to the playoffs, because, if you do get into the playoffs, the competition tightens up, and there are going to be times when these opposing defenses know your game and going to stop that run. You're going to have to let Russ cook more, and you're going to have to open it up. You're going to have your playmakers, your wide receivers get more involved. So I would say they need to start. And this is somewhat of a good test, just because, as I mentioned, the Texans, they're very pass happy with Stroud and Tank Dell. And I believe the Broncos also need to, combat fire with fire this week to a degree.
Yeah, and we're talking about injuries too. I mean, Tank Dell came on the injury report today as did not participate because he's suffering for some injuries. So maybe the Broncos will get lucky again. But I think that the Texans pass defense will allow the Broncos to do a lot more. Plus, they're getting Brandon Johnson back. Hopefully, he can help out. But the offense seems to be clicking a little bit more, so I expect it to be a much better passing game than we've seen recently. Less conservative. I think that Sean Payton will probably open it up because he was being a little bit more conservative, but as he's more comfortable, with the game plan and stuff, Russell Wilson is, I think they'll start to open up more. I think you're going to see a little bit more fireworks from the offense because the Broncos defense can't sustain over an average of 3 takeaways a game for the rest of the year. It's just, that would put them, as one of the best takeaway teams over the last several years, which is, it could happen, but I don't think we should count on it. So.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think, Sean Payton's very good with, the game plan against the defenses, as we saw with the Cleveland Browns, because we know that the Cleveland Browns have that top defense and it's hard to throw against them. So you saw a lot of those design runs, some of those traps inside, Russ kind of getting out of the pocket as well. So, I think to your point with the pass defense of the Texans and then getting Brandon Johnson back and folding Marvin Mims, because we did see a sighting of him this past week as well. I think that'll help open this up. But yeah, I do expect it to open up. It's just, it'll take a little time, I guess.
Yeah, and I think maybe you might see a bigger game from Zach Allen this week with the Texans starting guard being out. Zach Allen I've seen him get better and better as the year's gone on. When he first was playing the first couple games, I was like, oh my gosh, this seems like a huge waste of money on a free agent. But he's gotten a lot better. You might see a better game from him. You might see some interior pass rush that really gets after CJ Stroud. And, you might see some turnovers through that avenue. So I think they match up pretty well with the Houston Texans. Excuse me. Even though the Texans have been on fire this year unexpectedly. But I think the Broncos can match up fairly well with them. So, obviously we'll see, but the way the Broncos have been playing, I don't know why you would, pick them not to beat any team on the rest of the team on the schedule, except for maybe Detroit.
Yeah. Agreed.
But here's the deal. If they beat the Texans, they will hold the tiebreaker over the Texans, the Browns, and the Bills. All 3 teams are vying for the playoffs. If they have that head-to-head kind of matchup when it comes to the equation to get in the playoffs, those 3 games and this third one is key to having that happen. So even if they drop a game or 2 and they'll probably get into the playoffs just because they have those head-to-head matchups.
Yeah, and I was looking at that as well, Thomas. And then I was looking at some of the schedules for those teams, and you got to look at the quarterback situation for the Browns. And then, the Bills have a tough one coming up. I believe they have Dallas Cowboys and such. So it's not going to be easy for those teams trying to either creep into the playoffs or sustain their position. So it's looking very favorable that the Broncos will make the playoffs. Obviously, they got to continue winning, but it's looking very favorable. So.
We got Raul coming in here saying that he saw one of the Texans insiders say that Tank Dell's going to be okay. So, well, that's good. I'm glad he's not injured to the point he can't play. But the O-line is pretty banged up. So, thanks for that insider information, Raul. I did not hear that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it looks like he'll play.
That's good. Well, yeah. Like you said, glad that the injury isn't keeping him out, but I know that's one player we have to worry about because that offense, those receivers are pretty solid. I think Nico Collins and I think the Schultz tight end with Tank Dell. So it's a nice little squad they have there with the Texans.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to apologize again for being sick coming on here. So if I'm not my chipper self, that's probably why. But I'm going to grab a few comments here. We've got Greg Smith coming in. Whoops, sorry, wrong one. Saying that Vance Joseph may speak in a soft tone, but I think he's bringing the dog out of this defense. Yeah, it's funny that the Cleveland Browns fans and even their media folks were really upset with how hard the Broncos were hitting the Cleveland Browns players, and it's one of those things. It used to be that was all of NFL was all about the big hits. They had the crunch course, they had jacked up on ESPN, and now they're starting to push away from all those big hits, and now we're starting to see people complaining about them instead of being excited about them. But it's right. It's true. The Broncos defense is playing well, and they're playing aggressive, and there's a physicality about them that really it definitely wasn't present earlier in the year. And I haven't really seen it before in any of the other years leading up to this. So I think you're right. It's the credit goes to Vance Joseph for making that turnaround. I'm not going to apologize for wanting him fired because it was an embarrassment to begin with. Those first several games were an embarrassment, but I do, I've come around, and I'm glad that he was able to turn that around. And now that they're, other than the run defense is still a little soft, but definitely a more physical team and a more, I guess, a team that knows that they can really make that play at the end, make that play to win the game.
Yeah, I mean, the Denver Broncos can't win anyway. The 70-point game against Miami, now being labeled Dirty Denver. It's, I mean, football is a physical game. And I think after that 70-point performance, Thomas, they had to get more physical. They had to get more aggressive. I mean, we saw, a lot of just things went horribly on defense in Miami. I mean, I was there to witness it. Just poor tackling. They weren't engaged. They weren't doing anything up front. And, I think after that, Vance Joseph made an effort with his players to say, hey guys, we got to be more physical. Yeah. As Sean Payton mentioned with this past game, they changed up some of their looks and their fronts. They brought in bigger fronts for some of the I mean, so that has to happen. It's a part of game planning. It's a part of the game. So I think with that whole labeling of Dirty Denver, it just doesn't. Again, we can't win either way.
Right.
And football is a naturally aggressive game, and we're playing well on defense because of that aggression. So
yeah. Good quote of the day coming in with some support. Thank you so much for the super chat. Saying we beat the Browns D, we beat the Minnesota D, we beat the Buffalo D, we beat the Kansas City D. Come on, Texans are not as good as all those teams. They got beat by the Falcons and the Jags, and one people's are crazy. I don't know what that last little bit meant, but you're right. And not just, I mean, the Kansas City defense was playing incredibly well up until that point, and they still are playing pretty well. The Buffalo team was desperate. They needed a win. It was in Buffalo. And Minnesota's D wasn't a joke. And the Browns D, people were talking about them being, possibly historic level defense. Well, that talk is going to be shut down now because the Broncos went out and I thought they had their way with them. I think they pretty much had their way with them. And if it wasn't for their own mistakes, the Broncos' own mistakes, they probably would have put up even more on that defense. So you're absolutely right. Quote of the day. The Broncos really have beaten some very good teams in this 5-game win streak, but Houston is also a pretty good team. I mean, they're 6-4 or 6-5. I think they're coming down. They're kind of on the downward slide. Suppose they were looking really a lot better earlier, and then the Broncos are kind of on the uptick. But there's like they say, any given Sunday. So we'll see. The Broncos still have to bring their A game and go out there and really put pressure on CJ Stroud and try and force him into a turnover. He's been pretty good with the ball for a rookie. I think he's been exceptionally well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Quote of the day. I think for this game, I think this Texans, from what I read, that yeah, their run defense is pretty good, but the Broncos, from the pass defense perspective, they should be fine. That this is the game to open up this offense. And you know, think about it. Kansas City's defense, as Thomas you just alluded to, Kansas City defense was playing well when we beat them, and they still are. We know with Brian Flores in Minnesota how much he blitzes. So that was even confusing Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears Monday night. That's a very complicated and annoying type of defense that he brings. And they seem to sustain drives, get field goals, and Russ did that touchdown at the end. The Bills, despite all the injuries that the Bills had on defense, I mean, they're still pretty good there. So the Broncos have done a good job on offense to kind of mitigate some of the things that their opponents do defensively. And I see no difference here. Now, again, I do see from an offensive perspective, you have to score points just because what we've seen from Stroud and these folks. I think the Broncos also need to try to do that as well and open up this playbook. But yeah, you're absolutely right on those defenses.
Well, I think Russell Wilson's getting much better and much more comfortable in this offense too. And I said this
Yeah.
early on. I said that he's not going to look as good in the first half of the year as he will in the last half of the year for two reasons. One, he's got to get more comfortable in the offense, and two, they're going to face a lot weaker defenses going forward. I mean, the Houston Texans are giving up 252 yards passing per game right now. So, and then what I've seen from Russell Wilson, he seems to be reading the defenses better, a little more comfortable. He still doesn't get the ball quickly out of his hands, but that's who he is, right? He's not the Peyton Manning type of, I'm going to throw it quickly on time. He's more of a hold it and kind of wait and see type of player, but he's getting the Broncos in the right position. He's checking into the right plays.
Mhm.
And, when he needs to run, he does it, and he's not afraid to do it. And that has that's been very beneficial as well, other than he's fumbled, but he's got a past history of fumbling when he does do that. So, you got to take the good with the bad. But right now, Russell Wilson is starting to play better, starting to be more comfortable. I think this is the game where you see the offense really start to look like a Sean Payton offense that, you could look back and see, better passing numbers,
Mhm.
higher scoring. I just have that kind of feeling that that's what we're going to see. So quote of the day is coming back in again. Thank you so much for the support. Quote of the day saying, what I was trying to say, the media people are crazy thinking we can't finish 10-7 or 11-6. Well, I mean, I guess it's hard to, I can understand it. It's hard to believe. It took me a while to start
Yeah.
to believe, it's hard to believe that they can do it. But right now they have 6 games left. If they go 4-2, they're 10-7. I mean, that I don't see why that's hard to believe. They have, and there's only 2 teams with a winning record on their schedule. So, I mean, why is it so hard to believe that they can't go 4-2 or 5-1? I don't know. I think they can. I mean, obviously, I worry about the run defense, but I still think that the Broncos are setting themselves up to control their own destiny, especially if they beat the Texans. I think if they beat the Texans, they're probably working towards maybe that 5 seed. Really, I don't think they can catch the Kansas City Chiefs unless the Kansas City Chiefs just completely fall, because they would have to lose the Chiefs if they tied. At whatever, say the Broncos ran the table and only lost 5 games all year. The Chiefs would have to lose 2 games, and they would have to be in the division to make it even possible for the Broncos to win the division. Now they lose 3 or 4 games. Who knows? It's hard to imagine that they will. But I think the Broncos, if they beat the Texans, you're going to see them playing for maybe that 5 seed, not the 7 seed.
Yeah, again, quote of the day. Thank you for coming back in. We appreciate you. And I don't. I listen to some folks in the media, but from what I've listened to quote of the day, they're still stuck on that 70-point game. That I think that's the problem. They're
A lot of
still
people are.
stuck. And I understand, 70 points, that should have never happened. I get it, it was a season, but look at what has happened since. And look at the quality of the opponents. And they're not factoring that in. And I think that's what's causing them not to believe that this team can get to the playoffs. Because a lot of them still think that the Broncos can't make the playoffs. And when you look at what we just discussed, tiebreakers and all, remaining strength of schedules, this is set up for the Broncos to bare minimum get the 7th seed.
Yeah.
Bare minimum.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Thomas. You were gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna say I agree with you, but they also, after that 70-point game, there was a lot of things that turned around, right? A lot of things that they did. They got rid of players that weren't wanting to be here and play, and they got Baron Browning back. So those changes they made has helped considerably. So they're not comparing the team that was beat by 70-20 to this team that they have now. Keith Brugman, thank you for coming in with a great question, because I mean, this is one that we can all debate, but he says, if you need to choose between Christian Parker and Vance Joseph for your DC at the end of the year, who is your choice? Well, for me, I mean, even though I thought Vance Joseph should have been fired after that 70-point loss, and I'm eating my words, obviously, if he continues to have this run, you're going to have to give him another shot next year. I mean, he's earned it, so to speak, especially if they turn that around and they get into the playoffs. You don't really want to make any changes. I don't know if Christian Parker is ready to make that step up to DC now. Maybe he is. Maybe someone will take a shot at it. But, I mean, Vance Joseph, he's earned it from my perspective. I don't know about you, Ron.
No, I agree. Thank you, Keith, for coming in. It's going to be Vance Joseph for me. Just because of this turnaround, or what we've seen. Everyone was calling for his job after Miami. And now to have this team bounce back, have the players buy in. Players are raving about, his coaching style now, and being more aggressive and being more physical and taking the ball away. You even see it on the field with some of their packages. It's night and day, Thomas. And obviously it does help to have players come back, because I know Justin Simmons was out for a while and Baron Browning. So having those players come back helps as well. But I don't see how you wouldn't give Vance Joseph another shot, especially how he's turned it around.
Yeah. I saw a comment in here, and I don't remember, I can't find it in there, but someone said it's a historic turnaround. If they get to the playoffs, it is definitely one of the biggest, most historic turnarounds in NFL history. And the reason why I say that is because there were several 0-3 teams that turned it around and got to the playoffs. There's one 0-4 team that did it. That's the one that you compare it to, because the other 1-5 teams that turned it around, they didn't start 0-3. It's only the Broncos that started 0-3 and then went 1-5, and they got beat by 50 points, which is a historic butt whooping. So if they turn it around and go to the playoffs, I was going to write something up about it, but I was going to wait until it looked like they were getting to the playoffs to really kind of say that was a historic turnaround. But if they do, it definitely is. And I'll put some pen to paper and talk about those other teams and why this one should be considered at least one of the most, if not the most historic turnarounds. But I'm going to kind of wait and see on the playoff run. So we'll see. Phil McLaughlin's coming with Facebook stars. Thank you so much, Phil, for all the support that you give us from Facebook. He says, I really like the development I've seen from Bonito and McMillan. It's also pretty clear that getting Browning back has helped the D. Absolutely. Yeah. That Browning has been a huge jump. I did too. People were down on Bonito because he wasn't great, coming in last year. And I kept telling people, I said, Bonito was drafted because he was a bit of a project, but he had the skills. He needed to get stronger, which he has, and he needed to develop some more passing rush moves, which he has. And that's why his game has gone better. And I think you might see even a better game from him next year. McMillan is just kind of came out of nowhere. I saw him in camp. I thought he was really good. I still don't understand why Asang Bassi started over him to begin with, because he clearly outplayed Asang Bassi. And I know Bassi got 3 interceptions in the preseason, but he struggled in other areas of coverage. So I was a bit surprised, but I'm happy with the development of both of them. And if Browning can stay healthy he's a key edge rusher for the Broncos going forward.
Yes, thank you for this comment, Phil. And I agree 100%. Like, I love what I've seen from Benito. I think he's 7 sacks on the season, I believe. And so that has been awesome to see. That's very encouraging. I'm glad he was able to, strengthen up, get big to kind of, do that. And then for McMillan, what I like about McMillan is he's always around the ball. He's like a ball hawk. And he's been the one, I think, from what I've seen, just punching these balls out. So, he's been great as well. And obviously, we already know about Baron Browning. The fact that he came back, I was so ready for him to come back because I know once he came back, he would have an immediate impact, and we're seeing that. So yeah, that's a great point, Keith. Having all of these players on defense back healthy and playing at this level is just such a great thing to see. And again, we just hope this health continues as they make this playoff push.
Definitely. Quote of the day, coming back in again. Thank you so much. We appreciate it for sure. Saying one last thing, they better put respect on Russ's name. It's awesome to believe if you need a score and Russ has a minute at the end of the game, it's going to happen. Have a nice night, guys. Absolutely. People are still crapping on Russell Wilson. Yeah, he doesn't have a ton of yards. I get it. And he's fumbled. If you liked the trade originally when they got him from Seattle, you're basically getting the same guy that you got in Seattle. Not as many yards, but the same thing. Fumbles, getting sacked a lot, holding the ball too long, but he takes care of the ball. He doesn't throw many interceptions. Even if you include his fumbles, he's still not ranked very high in turnovers. And you're right. He has done enough to win the game. He has taken them down the field, and he has done enough to win the game. Now, I think you're going to see more, like I said, you're going to see more statistically better games going forward from Russell Wilson. But for me, I would rather have someone who throws 4 interceptions and not that many yards versus someone who throws a ton of yards but has 12 interceptions. That's a killer. Those are killers. The turnovers are killers. And he's executing the plan that Sean Payton wants right now. And you really can't ask for anything more from this team. In this 5-game win streak, he's done exactly what he needed to do to win. And that's what they've done. They won. And he's been a part of that. He has definitely been a part of that. I know he hasn't been, it doesn't look like Pat Mahomes out there, but he's done enough to win. And he beat Pat Mahomes. So,
yeah, thank you, Quota, today for coming back, and we appreciate you. And yeah, you're right. They better put some respect on Wilson's name with 20 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Leading the league in that. So, the media, everyone's going to, they're still thinking about, in my mind, and again, this is, I'm not saying this is truth, but this is kind of how I see it. They're thinking about last year. And then they're also thinking about how he was set up in Seattle. But they fail to realize in Seattle, they were winning a lot of those games on the strength of Russell Wilson's arm. Like if Seattle needed a touchdown at the end to win the game, there was not a lot of doubt that he was going to go and get that for you. And you're seeing the same. Now, of course, it may not be happening every game or as often as with Denver, but we saw moments, right? 2nd and 3rd down, he's scrambling, getting that first down. We saw in the Minnesota game, the 2-minute drill, getting downfield, getting that touchdown to Cortland Sutton. So, after what you've seen, of course, the touchdown and interception ratio and some of those Russell Wilson moments, and he's helping you win games, you have to put some respect on his name.
Yeah.
So.
Well, look what he did against the Browns. I thought he played a really solid game. He had that fumble, which was unfortunate. He should have got down after getting the first down, but I thought he checked to the right place. Yeah. He was looking off defenders well. He moved around very well, bought some time, and some of those passes were pretty nice passes. And like I said earlier in the show run, that I think if it weren't for some mental mistakes that happened that kind of pushed them back into a couple situations where they couldn't get going, they probably would have put more points up on this historic defense that everybody was labeling these Browns. And they went out, and Russell Wilson went out there and he played a pretty solid game. That's why I expect it to be better as the season goes on. People start to go, oh, wow, Russell Wilson is actually, better than we were giving him credit for, because his stats will look better. But I don't care about stats. If he's doing enough to win, he's doing enough to win, right? If he wasn't, then I would be concerned. If he was doing, completely idiotic things and, tossing the ball to the defenders all the time, then yeah, get him out of here. But he's not. And that's what's important.
Yeah. And I just, you speaking of Russell Wilson and some of those plays, like, remember that play off his back foot to Cortland Sutton? I mean, it's just, you just think about things like that, and I think there was another play near the end of the game, similar, where he hit Sutton down the field. So again, the Russell moments that we know are still there. But we just, I know Broncos fans are wanting to see it, more consistently, more often. And, it's going to happen. As this offense opens up, that there are going to be more of those opportunities to push the ball down the field. So,
and they're doing it also. They're doing it without any real superstars in the skill position. I know Sutton's having a good year, but he's still not doesn't have 100-yard receiving game, right? He has a lot of touchdowns. Awesome. I'm not trying to knock Sutton at all. He's playing great, but he the only receiver that has a 100-yard receiving game has been Mims, and it was only on 3 catches, right? There's not like a superstar. The running backs, they haven't gone over the century mark either. There hasn't been this dominant player on offense, other than, I think, Quinn Miners is definitely one, but he's not a skill player that you can put stats to. So they're making it work with these players who haven't dominated at their position yet. I think you'll start to see them get better and better, and hopefully, if they do get in the playoffs and they make that playoff push, you'll see them start to step up a little bit more. But for me, it's going fine. I mean, they're winning and they're doing enough to win. And I'm still waiting for that next step to happen, which I think will. You're going to see Javonte Williams start to get maybe another couple, get 100-yard or 2 game to end the season. You're going to see Sutton probably go over 100 yards. Maybe you'll see Mims do it one more time as they start to get him in there. That's going to make the stats look a lot better. Like I said, I don't care about the stats. It's fun to look at it, the box score, and be like, oh, wow, that was a great game. But in the end, they're doing enough to win, and that's what's important. And they're doing it with players that aren't extremely dominant at their position. And I think that's commendable.
Yes, definitely. Got a question here from Raul Camerla. Thank you for coming in. He asks, do you think Russ is going to be on the team next year? Yeah, he is. I mean, again, with that contract, and then also how he's playing. I mean, he's doing very well, as the Broncos quarterback. So I think he may not be living up to the contract how people may want, but he's playing efficient football. He's helping the Broncos win games. And now you're seeing that, because I know it was a little concerning because maybe that the Russell Wilson, Sean Payton relationship wasn't going to work, but we're seeing that work now. So I think giving all those factors, Russ is definitely going to make this team. And again, with this contract for sure, it's going to be the team.
Well, there's 3 reasons why he's going to be on the team next year. The biggest one is his contract. He's playing good enough to, if they dump him for somebody else, they're still going to be paying a big chunk of money. So he's playing well enough that maybe he's not playing up to his contract, but he's playing well enough that you don't get rid of him for somebody else. 2, who are you bringing in? You're going to start over with a rookie. If the Broncos make a run at the playoffs or make the playoffs, I think they're going to make the playoffs. Why would you decide, oh, well, we better go get a rookie? And then the 3rd reason is Russell Wilson, like I said, is playing good and he's winning football. So I just don't see how you justify getting rid of him next year. Now, in a couple of years when that contract is more manageable and you've brought in his replacement, I could see it, right? I can see it, but I don't see it happening until after the 2025 season, really. I think they've got to find his replacement, get that salary cap hit down. As long as he continues to play the way he's playing, and I'm assuming he's going to get better because he seems like he's getting better. The stats may not show it, but it seems like he's getting more comfortable in Sean Payton's offense. I don't see how you get rid of him. I just don't. I mean, I know people keep talking about they want a cheap quarterback because Russell Wilson has this super big contract, but there are plenty of cheap quarterbacks out there. Joe Flacco is going to be starting for the Browns. He's a cheap quarterback. Do you want to see someone like Joe Flacco running this team? Hell no. Like there's plenty of
He's in
cheap
his
quarterbacks.
prime.
I mean, Russell Wilson may not be playing like his contract says, but he's not playing bad. I just don't see get rid of him for at least 2 more seasons.
Yeah, I mean, this team is about to make a playoff push. Like who would you get? Why would you even want to get rid of Russ? So yeah, definitely not. We got Phil coming in again. Thank you, Phil. He said, "Let's face it. Right now, we need to keep Pirine and Williams almost 50-50 time-wise. Also, Russ is just starting to hit his peak, more like he was in Seattle." And yes, Phil, you're right. I'm going to take the last portion first and then get back to Pirine and Williams. But that's what we've been saying of we're starting to see, Russ kind of even develop more kind of with the checking of the protections we saw against the Browns, those Russ moments, scrambling off of play action, hitting those open receivers. So, we're starting to see that come more and more. And with the return of the Brandon Johnson, and when we get Dulcich back, you'll start to see it open up more. So that is absolutely correct. And you're also right on Pirine and Williams. It's good to have the time share between them. Although, as we see, Pirine is more of that all around back. Blocking, catching, running. So his skills from what we've seen are paying some great dividends right now. But Williams is also, that bruise. I would kind of like to see Williams kind of find more in the gaps. I feel as though he just sits there and kind of takes the tackle sometimes, but he's still nonetheless a great runner. But yeah, kind of keeping that 50-50 time. Both backs are those strong power backs, but what we're seeing is them kind of do different things, and I like that versatility with the offense. But I'm right there with you.
My perspective on that is I still think Williams should have the bulk of the carries. I think Pirine has been so good towards the end of the game because he hasn't had to carry a huge load all the time. He comes in spots. Williams has been that workhorse, even though he's, not getting 30 carries a game and, really grinding. He is grinding it out. Yeah. I think Pirine's been, I don't think they win those games without him coming through in the clutch moments. And I think that's because he's a little more fresh, right? I think he's a little bit more fresh because he's not carrying that heavy burden of, running up into the middle of that defense, constantly taking those hits. So if it's more Williams to Pirine, I'm fine with that. I think Williams still, he hasn't had those big runs yet. And I think that's why, before he got injured, he had several big runs kind of smattered into his kind of workhorse, carries. So I think that'll happen. You hit a crease and get through there. But I think both of them are playing very good. Although, that one fumble that went out of bounds is a little bit concerning, but luckily it went out of bounds. But yeah, I like both of them. I like the combination. I think, it seems like Jaleel McLaughlin is kind of the forgotten man right now, but that it comes with it. I mean, both the other two are doing exactly what they really, the Broncos offense needs right now. And yeah, like I said, I think Russell Wilson's going to have much better games going forward. You're going to see people start to be like, oh, Russell Wilson's really back now, because his stats are going to start to look a little bit better. He's not going to have huge numbers, but that's okay.
Yeah. All right.
Well, Ron, we're almost to the top of the hour. I'm not feeling so great, so I'm ready to wrap it up. If you are, get some cold medicine into me or something. But what are your thoughts? What are your last final thoughts about this? What's happening this week and leading up to the Houston game?
Yeah, so again, what's happening this week with Brandon Johnson? Again, that's very good, encouraging news. And I'm hoping that there's a good game plan from Peyton. I'm pretty sure there will be, but having that game plan for CJ Stroud, the defense coming together to rattle CJ Stroud a bit. But I'm very optimistic about this game. I'm not going to get any. We'll do our predictions on Saturday and such, and key matchups. But from what I'm hearing and Broncos camp, everything seems to be good and encouraging leading up into Sunday. So we will see.
All right. I'm just going to grab Michael's comment here. Michael Ronquillo has always supported us. So thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Michael.
Stars. And thank you for everybody for the support, really. But Michael, you're always here. You're always supporting the show. So thank you. It's a great show tonight, Thomas and Ron on Mile High Insiders. Go Broncos. Thank you so much, Michael. So much. Yeah, next week it'll be back to Luke and I. And then, but don't forget, Ron and I are on Saturday. We're going to have another pregame show like we always do, give you all the info and data that you need leading up to those games. And, it's always fun. I enjoy those pregame shows. So, but again, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you for the lively conversation, even though I'm not very lively being under the weather. So thank you very much. Have a great evening. And we will see you on Saturday. On Saturday.
Yes. Go Broncos.